Car thing down. Dude, it drew in a lot of people.
All right, we're good to go?
Yep.
Sounds like it? Let's get this over in place here. We are going to convene the August 4th Scott County Board of Commissioners meeting to order. Join me in the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. We got a little reverb here. Thanks for hanging with us with our technical challenges. And I think you only gavelled in once. That's going to bother somebody. We'll make sure we get that right on the outset. So item number 2, are there any amendments to the agenda? Not seeing any, so we will move on. How about let's approve the minutes of the July 21st, 2020 County Board meeting. Those were distributed. Are there any additions, changes, anything you want to talk about there?
Mr. Chair, I'll move approval of those minutes.
A motion?
Second.
Got a second? Any discussion? Hearing none, we're going to do a roll call vote because once again we are here in full strength with one joining on the phone. Well, several, but Commissioner Ulrich joining us via Skype. So, Tracy, take it away for a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Weckman-Brecky.
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf.
Aye.
Commissioner Beard.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye.
All right. Moving on to item number 4, recognition of interested citizens. Always a high point of the day to let folks come and address the board for whatever they may want to discuss. We have listening ears. We see someone approaching the podium. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you today?
Really, really well. How about yourself?
Good. Excuse me. Do you mind if I take my mask down while I speak?
I like
it.
Go ahead.
That way I think you can hear me better.
Please.
I will put it back on immediately.
Sure, you bet.
Thank you for the opportunity to come today. My name is Lori Lamb, Loretta Lamb officially. I'm a resident in District 1. My address is 531 Hahn Drive in Shakopee, Minnesota.
Thank you.
I also want to just make sure and introduce my colleagues who are here today as well. We're all from the Carver-Scott Master Gardener Program. We always come in force. I think you have seen and appreciate that. But first, over there, if she could just raise her hand, we have Shirley Rutz, who's the current chair of our county program. Scott Sendelar, who I think talked to you 2 weeks ago. He's the soon-to-be chair in January. We have Mandy Ernest and Ann Thorson, who are also, they're on the extension committee representing Master Gardeners too. And I think that's all we have. So I appreciate their coming today as well.
So I'm just going to interrupt you. Is there a possibility that they're living in the building someplace here? Because we think they're here quite a bit. So maybe we might just need to look into. I don't think we need security for that, but we might need to double check.
And you may see us again, so not to worry.
We got to have a little fun with it, right?
And we appreciate that. Fun is always important. But I think what it does speak to is our interest in really making sure that you understand what Master Gardeners do, what the extension programs overall do, and how important we believe it is to the citizens of Scott County. Okay, with that, I'll start.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Again, thank you for the opportunity to address you this morning. As I said, I'm here as a resident of Scott County District 1. I'm a taxpayer. I'm a member of the executive committee for Carver-Scott Extension Master Gardeners, and hopefully you all have received my previous email I sent a few weeks back, sort of outlining some of what my concerns are. Again, first let me say that I'm fully aware of the significant challenges you and frankly all of us face in balancing budgets during this very difficult time. I do hope, however, that a short-term problem such as COVID-19, which we hope is only a year or two, but maybe not, but we hope, does not lead to long-term budgeting decisions that have significant negative impacts on programming and services for Scott County residents. As a longtime state employee, I'm fully aware that once something gets out of the budget, it's really, really hard to get it back in. So this is why we're so concerned. In the spirit of your mission to work proactively to make investments guided by resident input, which will transform lives, communities, and government, I'm here to advocate for University of Minnesota Extension and all of its programming for Scott County. Obviously, I know more about Master Gardeners, and I'll focus some on that. However, the outreach provided by Extension provides access to unbiased resources, classes, and much, much more at no or minimal cost to Scott County residents. Many partnerships enjoyed within Scott County, for example with SHIP, are enhanced through Extension programs. Extension programs provide wraparound services that benefit citizens in many ways. Another really good example you can easily find at JAF, or the Juvenile Alternative Facility, where there will be people from Extension teaching hands-on courses in budgeting and nutrition, while the Master Gardeners are working beside the youth in the gardens to learn to grow food, conserve water, and save the pollinators. Simply put, Extension programs foster all aspects of the goal of creating safe, healthy, livable communities where everyone can thrive. I know this firsthand. I am proud to be a Master Gardener volunteer, and I know that I learn and grow myself each time I connect with other Scott County residents. I'll never forget the joy on children's faces when they learn that carrots don't just come from the grocery store. I brought some thank you notes just to show you that I personally received from some of the more than 650 kids, future taxpayers and children of taxpayers, that we impact in one day while teaching and working with the students at Eagle Creek Elementary School. One day, that's over 650 kids come through our programs and see how to learn and grow and impact their gardens and learn about nutrition, learn about how to thrive in an environment. Of course, Master Gardeners do much more than that, much more than Eagle Creek Elementary School, as evidenced by the more than 145,000 hours Master Gardeners have volunteered statewide just last year. But since I know you'll be talking about the budget regularly, I didn't see it on your agenda today, but I know that it's coming for decisions before you. I think it's incumbent upon me to talk about the impact of potential cuts to the Extension budget. As you well know, it costs roughly $2.20 per taxpayer to fund Extension services, services that could not otherwise be provided at anything close to this cost. As a taxpayer, I'm happy to support this portion of the budget as it helps all of our communities thrive. For the Master Gardener program specifically, the funding is roughly $40,000. This represents 1/2 of our coordinator's salary. The coordinator is a paid University of Minnesota employee. We have a wonderful coordinator. She's 0.8 FTE, and that salary is shared equally between Scott County and Carver County. If Scott County reduces the Extension budget, I fear this coordinator funding for the Master Gardeners will go away. Unfortunately, I fear this also means that most, if not all, of the services provided by Master Gardeners in Scott County will also go away. Master Gardeners should do what they do well, outreach and service in areas where they have expertise. The coordination with the U of M, Scott County, Carver County, our regional and local partners, and more should rightfully be left to a talented and capable coordinator like the one that we have. In short, I want you to know that as a taxpayer and a representative of the Carver-Scott Master Gardeners, your investment in Extension is an investment in the well-being of all of Scott County's citizens, families, and communities. So thank you again for the time and opportunity to stand before you and advocate for Extension programming for Scott County. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I want to let you go a little bit over there because I know you're representing plenty of folks out there in the hallway, so.
Sorry about that.
Nope,
I
you're
tried
good.
hard.
I didn't give you the 1 minute. I didn't, it's all good. It's all good.
Using your 5.
Yes,
I tried
exactly.
hard.
Yeah, so thank you for that.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate it. I'm just gonna look and make sure there's not another interested citizen. Oh, okay, come on in.
Trip over that.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
She can take it off if you want.
Yeah, if you want, yeah.
Good morning. My name is Anita Stevens. I live in the District Number 3, and I'm here to advocate for the 4-H shooting sports program. We before the pandemic, we had met at the Scale facility, and we're hoping to get back there as soon as possible. And I just want you to know that we will do everything in our power to work with your mandates and protocol and stuff like that. 4-H also has safety protocols in place, so we're just trying to get up and running again. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, usually we don't respond or engage with the public comment unless necessary, but Anita, you had sent an email to all of us, and
I
I
did.
forwarded it to the administrator, asking them to look into this matter and how we can work with you to get to yes. So you'll probably be hearing from someone on staff today or tomorrow.
Great.
And I think work with them on what they need. But I think what they were looking for was a plan to assure that you'd be able to socially distance and things like that while you were on the
Yeah.
ground. So you know, can't have 300 kids in a small space, but if you can limit the
Right.
number or something, work with them, I think we can get to yes. So
Okay.
know that that's in the works.
Perfect. And we're just looking for outdoor space at this time. Our equipment is stored inside the facility, so we'd have to get to it, but not everybody would have to go in. We prefer outdoor spaces, and we're limited to 25 participants, including coaches in a pod. So there's plenty of room to have maybe a couple pods out there.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think if you somehow you can put that in writing and make
Okay.
sure that our staff has it, I think you can get to yes. So
Great.
but you'll be hearing from them shortly.
All right. Thank you.
And in full disclosure, we should probably mention that Commissioner Beard is a seasoned shooting sports experienced expert, possibly champion, but that's still, there's some debate about that.
Yes, he has visited our program before, and we do invite all of you to come back out and visit us whenever you want.
Well, I was planning on it, but after seeing him shoot, I thought better of it and thought, well, maybe I would lay back in the weeds a little bit.
Old eagle eye.
If the target is 10 feet away, I'm sure you two can hit it.
I didn't want to get into any details. We don't need to say that.
And I just want to reiterate, shooting sports is not just a shooting program.
Yeah.
It's a youth development program.
Yes, thank you.
And I think the youth in the county really deserve that attention as soon as we can get it to them. Okay,
Awesome.
great.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right, now we're going to move to item number, we think.
Well, I just wanted
Okay.
to add, I'm going to bring Anita down to meet Mr. Nelson.
Oh, good.
That's where the plan has to come from, is Kevin. And all of our operations, from libraries to hazardous waste to what we're doing here today, have an operational plan. The RTF has not brought one forward other than we need to open. And so when we're bringing these kids, we have to make sure we have a plan in place. You know, we're probably talking about a maximum of 8, like at the shooting range, that can socially distance and move. And then Kevin needs to understand what they need at the archery range or what they need at the open space so that we can safely do what we need to do to meet the governance. So that's what we're working on right now. And I think Kevin needs to hear from Anita what those needs are so we can put the right plan in place.
And I would say that makes sense, that as a county, we do want to try to get things opened up, but we also have to go upstream and make sure we're following the rules and all those fun things. So having that information is certainly helpful to try to get that opened up. So just probably makes sense to mention that. All right, I don't see any more. I'm just gonna look to make sure there's no one else out in the hall. Okay, we're getting the nod from that group. So Mr. Lenz, come on up and talk to us about item number 5.1, if you please.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, Commissioners. Can you hear me okay through my lovely mask?
It's very Darth Vader-esque, but yes.
I've been told I'm very scary.
With a touch of Barry White, so it all works.
So what we're asking today is for the board to adopt Resolution 2020-115. This would be formally accepting the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act funding, or CARES Act, allocated by the state in the amount of $17,719,998 that is directly to the county, establishing a special revenue fund for that allocation, and authorizing the transfer of eligible costs already incurred and to be incurred to the said fund. On March 27, 2020, the federal government passed the CARES Act, which provides over $2 trillion in federal economic assistance across many different programs throughout government and directly to members of the public. The funds may be spent by local agencies to offset public health and economic impacts of COVID-19, but they must be spent on eligible funding expenditures. Expenses must be necessary expenditures incurred due to the public health emergency with respect to the COVID-19 pandemic. And in the guidance that we've received, they really want the boards to be involved in that decision making and the identification of what is a necessary expenditure and really the ultimate decision makers on this, which is why we're talking to you today. There must be costs that were not accounted for in the budget that was most recently approved as of March 27th. It doesn't mean that the funds can't be in the budget, it's that they weren't approved for that particular purpose, which we'll get into a little bit. And performance or delivery must occur during the covered period, but payments of funds need not be made during that time. In general, this was determined to be the end of the year when funds had to be spent, but for our purposes, it is the end of November, based on the governor's executive order authorizing the funds to be passed down to counties and cities and townships. To assist us in understanding what are eligible expenses, because this is a big federal legislation that we have continuously sought guidance on, there are two documents that you'll see incorporated in this resolution and also in all of the resolutions authorizing every single program associated with this fund. And that is the U.S. State Department of Treasury published two documents, the Coronavirus Relief Fund Guidance to State, Territorial, Local, and Tribal Governments, and the most recent update was on June 30th of 2020, and the Coronavirus Relief Fund Frequently Asked Questions updated as of July 8th, 2020. And as I said, those are both incorporated as exhibits to the resolution. All the CARES Act funding are subject to state and federal audit for the use of these funds. This means that any subrecipients of the CARES funds from the county must also meet these audit requirements as well. This is a big reason why, as we go through this document, you're going to see some of the points that we pointed out in order to maintain that audit trail throughout both this resolution and all the other resolutions of these funds. That's why your packet's about this big today, is to maintain that audit trail to show the board's decision of how we're spending this money and how it meets that federal guidelines, so that the county isn't going to be responsible for having to pay that back, where we can point back to, this is the reason the board made the decision, said it was a necessary expenditure, and said it was authorized within this bill. The County Board of Commissioners met in workshop on July 7th to discuss and reiterate, how to use these CARES Act funding, and reiterated at the county board meeting on July 21st their goals for allocation of the CARES funds. Those goals that they included were keeping employees working or getting residents working again, filling in gaps that unemployment insurance plus stimulus, the PPP program, and other programs didn't serve, helping businesses, organizations, and residents most harmed by the pandemic, providing support to businesses that can sustain and grow the economy, supporting operational changes to keep businesses operating during the pandemic, providing food support for families at risk and in the short term, targeting rental and mortgage programs for those in need not covered by the state, supporting distance learning, and supporting childcare for essential workers. There are a lot of allowable uses within the CARES Act legislation, and the guidance can be very, very specific and also vague at the same time. In order to provide clear documentation on the expenditures of these funds, Budget and Strategic Planning Department as well as the Accounting Department are proposing that a separate special revenue fund be established to capture all costs associated with the county's CARES Act funding allocation, and have the Board of County Commissioners specifically approve the transfer of costs in order to document the justification and identify the authorizing language within the U.S. Department of Treasury's guidance for the expenditures of these funds. I'm going to go through some of the funds, and the ones that are being sent out to the public I'm going to hit a little bit more lightly since you've talked about it several times, and dig a little bit more into what the board has said to kind of retain for county costs and operational things. So $5.5 million in grants to businesses, including in-home child care, sole proprietors, farmers, agricultural businesses, and nonprofits. As you look through the RBA, we have identified what specific language we're using to authorize from either the guidance or the frequently asked questions, with the specific guidance quoted below or the page identified from that guidance from that year, which is incorporated in the resolution. Number two, $2 million for housing security, including rental and mortgage assistance, as well as some additional funding for the county's existing hotel vouchers program. I do want to note that we are still waiting for the CHAP grant allocation. We have not received that yet. And if it does not come through as expected, we would look at adjusting how those funds are distributed to make sure there's plenty in all three buckets for the rental assistance, the mortgage assistance program, and for the housing vouchers. But we do want to get this moving because the CDA is ready to go and start moving some of these dollars out to the people who need them. We have $2.2 million for food shelf and distribution to nonprofits for PPE, food, refrigeration equipment, and other needed supplies for the distribution of food security, and to schools to assist in costs related to providing daycare for essential workers and distance learning that's not covered by other funds so far. We also have $1 million for rural broadband access, for school distance learning and access, and to support continued teleworking guidance. Based on the usage of the existing county fiber backbone, we expect that these projects will be completed prior to December 1st and will be utilized while the pandemic is still requiring distance learning and teleworking to continue. I'd also note that we will continue to work with the townships on making sure this happens quickly and that we meet the board's guidance on making sure there's a share of support of funds across this program. Last area I want to talk about is $7 million for costs incurred by the county. The first area is for direct response and those second order impacts of COVID-19. This includes staff who are directly working to prevent the spread of the disease. And the primary examples are those like our public health staff participating in contact tracing, providing essential services, assisting in testing functions, providing guidance to residents on the preventative practices, and working with businesses on maintaining sanitary and safe environments, which I know they do extensively, and the businesses in our community have been very responsive. The next area is to cover payroll expenses for employees that are substantially dedicated to mitigating or responding to the COVID-19 public health emergency. So this is largely related to our law enforcement officers, that the Treasury guidance says that we can presume for them to be substantially dedicated to this response, and then further provides guidance that for those who are substantially dedicated to the response, we can incorporate all of their payroll expenses, not just the time that they are spending on the response. This is probably the hairiest issue that we've run into in terms of this definition of that. But working with our other counties, we're trying to take the same approach and really kind of focusing on what we believe those who are substantially dedicated, outside of the public health staff that are obviously spending a lot of their time on this, but those law enforcement and public safety officials who are directly out in the community or dealing with people from the community and have to change their practices day in and day out. So things like the sheriff emergency management staff, our dispatch, jail staff, and sheriff's operation support services licensed deputies are included in this area. Next area is to cover the cost of expenses that were unaccounted for in the county budget or were used for a substantially different use than approved in the budget. So this example is largely including employees working in the emergency operations center, employees who are having to take time sanitizing and cleaning beyond their typical practices across the org, and redeploying staff to different areas to support functions to meet the needs of the citizens, or where we might be short-staffed or where contractors aren't stepping up to where we expected them to be, and we have to now deploy people into that different area in response to the pandemic. It also includes the purchase of PPE, which we didn't have to buy in such significant supplies previously. And the final area that we're focusing on is covering the cost of teleworking improvements for our employees. I've always asked them to stay home to help prevent the spread of the disease. They are making great efforts to try and continue to work productively from home, but there's more we can do that help reliable internet access, making sure they can get on the network, equipment that they need in order to perform their job well. So that's the last area we're really looking to make improvements, is for them to continue to work from home or different locations for the long term. Any questions at this point before I go on just to my last few things?
If this is appropriate, yeah, I have some questions, and it may be that I just need to figure out where things are, because obviously there were hundreds of pages, and I may have missed some things. So I think my questions, I have two questions. So in this RBA, we talk about the $5.5 million for business support, and it lists a few things, and I think it says on here even nonprofits and in this part of it. But I'm not seeing, and then I see our RBA for that $5.5 million to go to, being administered through Next Stage and things, and I see no place where a nonprofit, and I think we've had that discussion, I don't mean like just a nonprofit like fundraising, but we have some actual businesses who are organized as nonprofits, and I didn't want them lost. I'm seeing that they're lost, but maybe I'm not seeing the right page. I'm seeing that in our 5.5 million, that if they're not covered yet, we're saying they're covered here. So
that was
what
a
am I
discussion
missing?
we actually had as we were preparing this. And the struggle was, how do we include nonprofits that are organized with businesses, or that are businesses that are organized as nonprofits, without opening it up to nonprofits that this isn't really targeted for. We want to target those that are really operating as a business and just organized that way. And so that's why the language is kept more broad here in this overall authorization for the use of the funds, as we figure out how to clarify those definitions in order to target those nonprofits that really do external business work.
And how will we define that? Because I think, you know, where there's nonprofits who have employees who deliver a service, where's that, where are we looking at that line to be? Because I'm not sure if we're trying to keep people employed
Yep.
and things happening, what does it matter? And in some ways, it's not just lining individuals' pocketbooks, it's keeping people employed and providing that.
The issue is the definition of a nonprofit and trying to get at somebody that has employees and keeping them employed and going versus allowing the Shakopee football boosters to apply for it. And so that's the issue that has come up, is how do we, as they work through that, how do we get at ones that are true employers? And so they're trying to work through that definition. And Next Stage is not set up to do that. So we're trying to take a look at how do we carve some of those out. You will still see the nonprofits listed in the $2.2 million as well allocation, if there are some ways to work it in through that. More directly looking at those nonprofits. When we just list it broadly, it becomes problematic then on who's eligible to
Sure.
apply.
Sure, and I guess just my feedback on that would be to look at some of the same things you have in place for businesses, with a physical location, employees, that type of thing. I think it could be solved with that criteria.
And I think staff and the CDA are trying to look at that and how we carve that out specifically.
Perfect, thank you, just want to make sure that wasn't lost. My second one has to do with that 2.2 million for food security and schools, is how it's listed here. And I guess my question, and maybe it's coming up yet at a different board meeting, but I hope not, because I hope it's in process. How is that getting distributed? Is that being done internally, and how's that happening?
So I know that we've already had reach out to the schools specifically on what are their needs, what are they seeing. I do also know that the governor did just authorize through executive order another big allocation for school funds, so we don't really know what has or has not been funded. A lot of the requests we receive through the nonprofits right now are actually coming through public health and going through our logistics branch. So we'll have to figure out the mechanics of that specifically in terms of how we set up arrangements to make sure it's being spent, whether it's we purchase and provide to them or provide them money in order to purchase. So the mechanics of that are a little bit less defined as some of the other areas where we're really trying to get the money out the door quickly. But I would say we're already doing some level of support to some of the nonprofits, especially in the food distribution area. We really just have to define how we want to do that.
Yeah, and to support what Danny said, Commissioner Brecky, Mr. Chair, that one we left to the next board meeting. It's getting these contracts in place with CDA and Next Stage and Access to move it to make that December 1st. They're continuing to identify those needs, and then those will come forward. You're going to see some RBAs, I would guess, for the next couple meetings
Okay.
coming forward involving CARES and how do we meet those needs. But we left that one
Perfect.
until we have these agreements in place and this moving, because it takes time to get those applications in and then go through them and get the money out to the public.
Great, that helps, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Danny, thank you, Commissioner Brecky, for that line of questioning. So, as I'm understanding this, we want to move this resolution ahead so we can get the 17.7 million in our bank account now, but this board can still respond to a changing landscape. If, for instance, the governor showers the school districts with a boatload of money, we can adjust where we're flowing it then. So we're going to have that option in the next couple of weeks.
Yep, and so there's actually a couple parts to this that we've kept in place to allow flexibility. One, the board can reallocate this. So essentially what we're doing is we're setting up a budget outside of the budget process. We're having a special fund and allocating line items essentially. The board can adjust those at any time.
Thank you.
This also allows for the county administrator to adjust those funds, which he can do within the operating budget now. Based on really we're not seeing the demand in this area, we want to move more funding into, say, the small business assistance. The other thing we have in here, and this is both for the administrator but also for the CFO, is that if we are starting to get money back or not utilizing that money and we are close to that deadline, being able to, again, where the administrator would increase the amount that the county could receive and the CFO could transfer additional eligible CARES Act funding costs to this fund in order to not have that money essentially being returned where we could utilize it for our operations or to continue those programs after the deadline, but just using county funds in the future.
And Mr. Chair, just to follow up on the return, because there are some of us that say, well, send it, not using the money just because it's there isn't necessarily a bad thing. In this case, this federal money came through the state to us. If we don't use it by December 15th or so, it goes back to the state.
Yeah, so the cities have till November 15th, I believe is the date. And if they don't use their money, and this includes not stuff that's run through us, but direct allocations to the city, it comes back to the county. The same thing with the township dollars. We have till November 30th, December 1st, depending on which number you want to pick. And then that money goes back to the state, and then the state has 30 days till the end of the year, and it goes back to the federal government.
Okay, thank you for the trail, appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those things, I mean, we've hammered that pretty hard in workshops, that we need to make sure, as you just stated, which was asked, that we continually, this isn't gospel truth, it's subject to change. And so if there's certain groups that, oh, we're part of this bucket, we can't wait, but maybe that bucket changes, that's built into this.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we just need to keep harping on that because it's this weird, you can feel this boot in your back pushing you to spend this money, and it's got to be done by December, which is just odd, but that's a whole nother story. Knowing that things are going to ebb and flow because how did you, it was written in here, things are incredibly specific and also incredibly vague. Both are true simultaneously, which is odd, but it's true. To making sure that we can be and try to get as much money into people's pockets, so to speak, through businesses or rent and mortgage assistance versus other entities or jurisdictions, as we talked about at the last meeting, that also have their own channels to the state and feds to get certain amounts of dollars, to make sure that which kind of goes to my double dipping, which we've talked about, which is really where my question is, because again, there was a lot of pages and maybe I missed it, but I didn't see it in some of these in the consent, which is why you're here presenting ahead of consent, because a lot of this will impact what we're going to talk about next through consent. But how are we ensuring the double dip versus the gap? Is it double dipping or is it gap or is it both? And a couple buckets that's going to hit.
So for the double dipping, one thing that's included in this RBA is language that it's possible the actual demand will not meet the expectations, or that new state and federal programs may provide some relief within the targeted areas. So that's specifically intended for if something new comes out and we're no longer addressing a gap, but we'd be having people double dip, that we're able to adjust that. And that's in the second last paragraph of the RBA, the first or second sentence. The other part is that as allocating these funds, we are required to monitor all of the programs as subrecipients. And so in all of the contracts and all of the allocations we're doing, we're requiring that subrecipient monitoring, which includes providing of fiscal documents, providing of how these funds were spent, in order to verify that one, double dipping was not done, and that they have to verify double dipping did not occur with that. And two, that they are spending it in the way that it was intended for. And that meets the guidelines that we have laid out, and we've worked very hard looking. I've probably read these guidelines like 20 times between the first ones that got sent out and this morning, to make sure our language is crafted, our programs are crafted in a way that fits within these guidelines, including the cannot have received funds from another program for this specific expense.
Did you have? Because I mean, I
Over there.
Getting their steps in.
yeah, true.
So, Mr. Chairman, and you don't have the specific requests of the forms that the CDA has been working with our staff on, but in those forms, they have to document, have they received PP? Have they received other funds from the state that were for COVID-19 or the coronavirus? When they look at that, those forms will actually document what those expenses and what those funds went to. They cannot utilize these funds then for those same expenses. So that is in the housing program, that is in the small business program, and they will have to report, did they receive as a daycare provider funds earlier from a program? What were those expenses for? What are they asking for this time? And those will be validated and checked.
So the one question, I know this may rub some people the wrong way, but specifically to rental and mortgage. And I know we talked about this, but this is where I didn't see. If somebody's has been making more money by not working and still is behind in rent or mortgage, are they eligible to get these grant dollars if they've been making more money?
That would have to be, I think, part of that review.
And I know, I get it, it sounds kind of, but it falls into the tough love category. Like if people aren't making sound decisions on, to me, housing's a kind of a big deal, and they're doing other things with that money, I don't think that should be rewarded. That's my feeling.
Understood. And part of the review is what have they been receiving? What was their income before? And then the why they are behind. I can't tell you that somebody,
I know. I just, and I think we're all on the same page, but the idea is, I think the CDA ran out of their money pretty quick on the last program they just did, that a lot of this is intended to get to people and businesses and nonprofits and other categories that have not been able to get something for, if they had 101 employees or whatever or they were $1 over the threshold, to try to get this money into people that have not received, whether it's extra unemployment or PPP, and I mean, that can even be debated if that was spent appropriately, but to try to spread it around.
how long it was for. So
Right.
if they're documenting expenses from, March when they were shut down till May, those could be a different set of expenses than that when they reopened, they had expenses to revamp their business or to continue to pay their rent, as Commissioner, Beard has raised in the work sessions. The same thing with the housing. We tried to get a broad expanse of it, right? The CHAP money, which we're still waiting on, and they're anticipating somewhere between 1.4, 1.5, whatever the number is that really low, vulnerable income rent. Then the $450,000 targeted with the funds you saw today were a little bit higher income of rent. And then the mortgage was covering what the CHAP didn't to a little higher income. And so we've tried to capture what are really those, what we believe vulnerable and potentially ones that, we had 5,500 foreclosures on mortgages, remember, in 08, 09. It was an extremely high number. And you've made it clear you want to try to prevent that. And so they will review the documents, they will see what other people have received, and then they will try to make balanced decisions based on that.
And I think we're all on the same page. We're all feeling the vague yet specific things that are coming down our channel that we have to report back to, so we're not, paying some penalty, and we're feeling that like we want to help as many people as we can.
Correct.
That haven't received help as best, we can, all while we're navigating these weird waters of there really is not great specificity with some of these dollars. So I know we're working through this and we're trying to capture as best we can in the paperwork. I just wanted to at least, again, this is probably my broken record line of questioning, but I know that we are trying to fulfill those questions that we had in different workshops. I just wanted to make sure, not seeing it, that maybe I missed it, that as we kick it down the road to our kissing cousins at the CDA, kind of related, kind of not.
Multiple discussions on the responsible use of funds they've received.
Yeah, and I know that, and that's awesome, and I certainly am not trying to insinuate that we're not, because you know that.
Nope, and it's hard to write and capture every
I know,
detail in a
it is.
resolution. There's
Right,
more
it
on
is.
the forms that people will have to provide, that's what gets reviewed.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree with that.
It's the same with the technology one. Danny talked about $1 million. Well, that's not gonna cover the entire program. And you made it very clear the townships and the private sector have to come to the table as part of a partnership.
Right.
So we might end up prioritizing certain townships that bring their funds to the table. If another township doesn't, we might not invest there. So there's gonna have to be some tough decisions made there as well.
Well, the clock is ticking, and boy, is that secondhand making a lot of noise.
I would also note, for your specific question, one of the things in the housing and rental program, the mortgage and rental program, is that they were current prior to this happening. So with your concerns about someone not being responsible, we're trying to focus on people who are already attempting to be responsible in their spending and continue that forward as kind of a extra requirement in there.
Well, in the line of questioning, honestly, it is out of love. I know people, what? Yeah, tough love, albeit, but like I want to get out of the enabling business and getting into the transforming business, and some of that is, I've taken a 6x6 to get me into compliance on some things in my life, and it was helpful. Didn't feel good at the time. Thankfully now it's like a 2x4, but you know,
Am I the only one laughing at this? I mean, the 6x6, so.
yeah. Well, maybe you can relate. Maybe that's why. Well, that's a discussion
Three
for.
of us know what that is.
So that's the whole. You know, it's all about trying. How do we transform? How do we move forward? How do we? All of us. So that's you guys know that, but I just wanted to ask the question because we're trying to capture this in words and it's squishy and because it's squishy coming down to us, and so that's the only thing I wanted to talk about while we had this opportunity, and to see if I could get you to speak more words with that fancy face mask and that nice sound.
If ask anybody, I can go on and on, but I won't do that.
All right, I'm gonna throw this back on. But before I do, are there any more questions on this?
I think this is all good, especially with these other items on consent. I mean,
Right,
that's the
right.
purpose here.
Yes.
And Mr. Chair, in addition to that then, so like Credit River last night has allocated of their 400-some thousand, they, I believe 300,000 is allocated towards broadband, and so that all can mix in with that million and whatever, right?
We're seeing some nods.
That would depend, I guess, if they want to partner with the county in the program that we have, or if they want to invest it with a different provider. So, I mean, they have that
Okay.
choice, Commissioner.
Yeah.
I mean, we hope they would want to utilize our backbone and partner with us, because they do have a couple locations that impact even more than Credit River Township.
Yeah. And I believe that's the truth, so, good.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's feeling the heat trying to get this thing done, so, which sometimes when time is not on your side, that,
That's the tough part right now, is
yeah.
the time.
Yep, and clarity on
Move
some
things
things.
along here.
Yeah.
Yep, you're right.
Commissioner Beard?
Mr. Chairman, and just my closing word on this is, because of the timelines, the amount of money, and you hear the discussion here this morning, and this is now August, 4th? Brace yourself that we may get to December 15th, and we may have not spent all the money. Our staff will play by the rules, they'll follow the direction of the board, but we will play within the boundaries of, or operate is a better way to say, not play, within the boundaries of the rules that have been given to us with this money, and if we can't invest it all, spend it all, whatever, then we may have to send some back, and we should be prepared to be okay with that.
And it's definitely not lost on anyone here that it is, well, it's digital dollars, but ultimately taxpayer money. Like that is not lost on any of us.
Correct.
But it also is this weird, where did this money come from? But again, that's a topic for keyboard dollars. Yeah.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, unless Mr. Lenz has more to present, I'm happy to offer Resolution 2020-115, accepting the CARES Act funding allocated by the state in the amount of $17,719,998 and establishing a special revenue fund for the allocation and authorizing the transfer of eligible costs already incurred and to be incurred to the said fund, and move its adoption.
I'll second.
We have a motion in a couple seconds. Is there any further discussion here? And I'm just, as part of this discussion, as Tracy's coming up, gonna hit it once again, that we did move this ahead of consent because consent is pinned on a lot of this particular item. So it's not like someone sees this consent and, oh my goodness, you're doing that on consent. It's based on what we just did and all the workshops and conversations we had, so. All right, with that, Tracy is at the podium. We have a motion and some seconds, so take it away.
All right, Commissioner Weckman-Brecky.
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf.
Aye.
Commissioner Beard.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
All right, thank you very much. That moves to our consent agenda, and these items will be passing in one motion and have been gone through, as they always are, through workshops with the staff and so forth, and many of these are pinned on this last item agenda, so let's read through them quick. Item number 6.1, approve the request for rezoning of 40 acres from A1 Agricultural Preservation District to A3 Agricultural Preservation Density District. Denise Edstrom applicant and Arnold and Patricia Ganson property owners in section 23 of Belle Plaine Township. 6.2, approve the request for rezoning 40 acres from UER Urban Expansion Reserve District to UER-C Urban Expansion Reserve Cluster District. Randy Kubish applicant and Goldie M. Novak Revocable Trust property owner in section 36 of Helena Township. There's my Montana there. 6.3, approve the request for an interim use permit to operate a mudjacking home extended business. Chris Hilfer and Julie, I believe, Cakon, applicants and property owners in Section 36 of New Market Township. 6.4, approve the conversion of an approved on-sale liquor license to a seasonal on-sale liquor license for Seavers Corn Maze LPDBA Seavers Farm in Louisville Township. 6.5, approve payroll process of personnel actions. 6.6, adopt resolution number 2020-111, approving an agreement with Carver County for a third addendum to the existing Carver County agreement for additional joint fiber builds and uses in each other's fiber networks. I love that. Thank you. 6.7, adopt resolution number 2020-113, authorizing development of a business assistance program, entering into a subrecipient agreement with the Scott County CDA to administer on behalf of Scott County, and amending the budget to utilize $5.5 million from the Coronavirus Aid Special Fund, the CARES Act Fund. 6.8, adopt resolution number 2020-114, authorizing development of a housing support program, entering into a subrecipient agreement with the Scott County Community Development Agency to administer on behalf of Scott County, and amending the budget to utilize $2 million from the Coronavirus Aid Special Fund, the CARES Act funds. 6.9, authorize submittal of a Clean Water Fund grant application to the Minnesota Board of Water and Soil Resources for a permanent outlet structure on McMahon Lake. 6.10, adopt resolution number 2020-110, authorizing entering into an agreement with Access Networks, Inc. to expand broadband in underserved and unserved areas of Scott County. 6.11, adopt resolution number 2020-116, establishing a 2020 early retirement incentive program. Those are the 11 items on consent.
Mr. Chair, I do not want to pool number 6.11, but I just want to have just a comment about the early retirement program, because it's showing in a budget constrained time, it shows a 2020 budget hit of about $370,000. Which is accurate, but down the road, which doesn't show on here, it shows savings that we think make that worthwhile, especially as we go into next year with the uncertainty surrounding the whole pandemic, recession, and so on. Just want to make that point.
Yep, that's good. That's a good point. Thanks for making that.
With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll move the consent agenda as presented unless there's others.
Have a motion? Second. We have a second. Is there any further discussion on the 11 items on consent? Otherwise, Tracy is ready to take it away.
I am. Commissioner Weckman-Brecky?
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf?
Aye.
Commissioner Beard?
Aye.
Commissioner Beer?
Aye.
And Commissioner Ulrich?
Aye.
All right, now we're going to move to 7.1, looking at adopting resolution number 2020-112, authorizing entering into an agreement with internet providers to bring affordable, adequate internet connectivity to identified low-income housing units. We're going to get our screen changed here. We need a little musical interlude here.
You should be good there.
Good morning,
Good morning.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners. My name is Cindy Geis from the Community Services area, and I'm here today to talk a little bit about this resolution that's in front of you today, talking about trying to provide some internet connectivity to some buildings that were deemed deep subsidy through the CDA. As Danny had talked about the allocation that was approved within the former board agenda item with that $17 million, there has been $1 million that was allocated toward broadband and internet service and keeping people having the ability to work from home and the kids being able to school from home as needed. And we know that some of the things that we have seen over the course of time is that residents have been calling saying, I can't get my good connectivity. And we've heard from schools early on last spring where the schools have been saying, we have kids, that either do not have access to internet, or that the internet that is available to them is unaffordable. So therefore, the schools were looking for an alternative solution to help those kids be step in step with children that do have full and adequate service. So with this resolution, we had to kind of fast track this one, and when we sent out the RFP for this, we did not know what the results were going to be. They first came in last Friday. So I apologize for it being squishy, as you like to call it, when you first received it, because it's like, well, who is this and what do we know today? As you know, that there are many actions taken by the state and local governments to try to help ensure safety and make sure that we can continue in some capacity for fairness for all, right? And so if I have great internet and you don't have any, just because of where you live, there's a fairness issue here. And what is our role as a government to try to help move that along? As you know, our fiber network was put in really for this reason. We put a ring around to make sure that we could connect local governments. We made sure that there was redundancy in our fiber backhaul. We made sure that there was connection to the 511 building down to Omaha and the like. But in the meantime, we have not done what we needed to do to make sure that we have reached all the rural areas of the county, nor have we done a good job to make sure that if we have a role in providing access to people who don't have it, how do we do that? So we went through a collective effort with the CDA to say, what do we know today? And how can we make sure that we do whatever we can in a time frame that meets that December 1st deadline? But even more than that, if we can try to meet it in a time frame that actually helps students get back to school, then that is what our full intent is in this agenda item. We know that we have to deliver by 12/1, but we had it in the RBA that if anybody responded, we want to see what their timetable is. In the response that you see here above, and what the audience sees, is it doesn't really talk about the timeline, but I'm going to tell you what that timeline is, because there are multiple factors that impact our ability to deliver by September 1st, and we can get into that a little bit. But anyway, the CARES Act is a proposal limiting, or this proposal is limiting dollars to really these units. As much as we want to say we want to provide affordability for all, we know that our role probably isn't going to get us there, and our funding is not going to get us there. And at some given point, we need our providers to step up and help get us there as well. And that's where we're looking for a partnership. We're looking for a partnership with our schools, with our townships and our cities, and with our providers. And the county wants to be in that game too, but we don't want to be in it alone, and nor should we. So we received, we did receive one proposal on this, but one of the things that I wanted to talk to you a little bit about as you're looking at these units is there were a couple factors that we didn't know going into the RFP. Number one, do these buildings already have broadband and internet access to them? We don't know that. We have not reached out to those building owners to say who provides service in your area and have they provided it to these buildings. And number two, we don't know if you have a provider providing access, do they have a contract where they're the only provider that can provide the access to these units? So even if we have a response and saying, yes, we're going to provide internet to these, we may not be able to do so. So that's one of the challenges that we have going forward. So as we look at this list of 13, we know these is the maximum that we're going to offer, but we don't know which ones are actually going to allow us to come in. We also know that in order for us to try to deliver what we want to deliver in these units, the building owner has to agree. So those are some factors that we're still trying to work out. We had Julie Siegert reach out to some of the owners that she knows. Julie Siegert from the CDA, who of course works heavily with this deep subsidy housing units. And she received like two answers from one of them on the Sarazan, who has an exclusive contract with actually two providers, CenturyLink and Comcast. So what's our role with those? So with this approval of this RBA, the provider whoever we award this to will work with Comcast and CenturyLink on the Sarazan and saying, we need you to go step and toe to toe with us. We don't have to be the provider, but we need you to walk in tandem with us and get these services out there because they are available, and a lot of it is federally funded to these students. So let's make sure these students have access. They may tell that provider to take a walk. Well, and that's their role, but we will continue to pressure. If that's the answer, then how do we reach the city to talk to the developer? Or the owner? How do we have, a couple other folks step in? We can't hog tie them and make them do that. But I think with some positive encouragement, hopefully we can get there. We also know that there's another unit that has provided service to them, but we don't know if it's exclusive. They don't think it's exclusive, but we still, again, do we talk to that provider first and say, hey, if it's Nubera, if it's Mediacom, or if it's one of the others, have you done this? Do you offer these free or reduced internet opportunities? And if you don't, why not? So again, pressure them. The response to this isn't, hey, we are going to get, this is all about me and me providing this and me gaining effort, having effort on this. It's about how do we get to them quickly and in the most efficient manner. So we received one response, and you're looking at it now. And it is from Access Networks. Of course, NetWave is the provider who provides the direct response. And as you approved earlier, NetAccess was also the one who is responsible for standing up the tower, or not standing up the towers, but putting equipment on the towers and standing up those micropops that are needed to better serve those areas that are outside the range of those towers. So Access is, we already have an agreement with them on providing some of the day-to-day stuff as well. So they're very knowledgeable about our fiber backbone, our fiber network system, and kind of where they can go. And they've done a lot of research on this already, just because they're actually a company that, regardless of who provides it, every student needs to have access. That every student needs to read, every student needs to be educated. And it's great because they're doing other things outside of just these types of things with money out of their own pocket to try to help move that forward as well. So we only received this one. We did have one response from a provider saying, I can't meet the 7-day requirement. This is a 7-day RFP. I need more time. We had another provider that said the Friday that this was due, early that morning, that they do not have the ability, that this went into the email box of someone who was on vacation. They're just getting to it now and they need an extension. Our problem is that we don't have time to waste. Mm-hmm. It's the students who are at risk here, and we don't want to let keep those students at risk. So we need to fast track this as much as we can, and it needs to be a priority. So we denied their request for an expansion or extension.
Mr. Chair, Cindy, where have the school districts been in this? Are they working hand in glove with us, or are we taking the lead on this thing?
The school districts, we've been in contact with some of the school districts. What they're providing is like how many hot spots and how many things are we doing there. We have two school districts in our former agenda item that was already approved through the consent.
Yeah.
We've had some school districts that have approved funds for micropops because they know that it's maybe not in a building. It's really it's a broad thing. And so right now we're continuing to have school districts as well to see if they have some funding that will help us move this agenda item forward and help mitigate maybe kind of what our dedication of our funds are, so we could reach as many as possible. Mm-hmm. But we also have the city of Jordan in this case saying, hey, you know what? We're very, very interested in maybe, again, we don't have confirmation, allocating some of our funds to the Valley Green mobile home park. There's, when we're looking at 723 students, half of them or in that mobile park.
Right.
And as I talked with Access after I received their proposal, I said, if we have to do, one at a time, I know that it's gonna be when you have access and as you find out different things on the three things that I know we have to continue to know. Do they have, internet today, and do they have an exclusive contract and all those types of things. But once we find this out, we've gotta go and hit those developments that can provide us the biggest value quick. Let's get to that Valley Green mobile home park. Let's get to some of these other areas where we can impact the majority of these students. Not to say that all of them are not important, all of them are not important. All of them are. It's just how do we get to as many as we can in the most efficient manner and in the speediest manner.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, Cindy, so are you saying right now with these student counts here, we don't know how many of those students of those counts have internet or good internet access right now? So like in some of these cases, it could be a lot of them.
It could be. What we do know is these are the number of students based off the school's records who live in these units.
When I was talking to some school districts, they seem to have a pretty good idea about how many didn't though. We haven't been able to get that.
I think that that's a work in progress as they're trying to get us this information. They know how many hotspots that they delivered, and so they kind of, if they delivered a bunch of them to these areas, it's these families. What we don't know is the internet access they have, is it adequate?
Right, okay.
Is it low? Is it just slow? So those are the other things that we're trying to work out with the providers that are providing internet. We also don't know, is it just limited where the family really can't be on multiple devices? So maybe a student can get on, but now the parents can't work. So then what? So those are other things that we're looking in tandem, which is why you see student fee and family fee. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that, because in the RBA here, we said we want the student cost, the E-rate, to be no more than $20. And we want the family cost not to be any more than $29.95. And when you look in this proposal, you see they're flipped. Well, that's because Access did some homework and they said, we can get the whole $29.95 committed free through E-rate. So if there's free, well, someone's paying for it. We all are through the federal government reimbursement program. But to the family who lives in these units, their out-of-pocket is a $59 one time and $20 a month, which it makes it really affordable, given the speeds that they're going to actually provide to these units, which will allow kids to school and people to work at the same time and have no interruption.
And I think you did say this, but the E-rate, when you talk about E-rate, that's the federally funded component, so it's not something we've created. It's taking advantage of a program that's
Correct.
already there.
So what the provider will do is they will bill the school district, and the school district gets reimbursed from the federal government for those costs, for everybody who's taken advantage of these. So as we move forward, we are looking for access to, if they're granted this proposal, to move forward as quick as they can. I do know that they have kind of already done their due diligence way up front, and they started working on this a week ago to try to reach out to these owners already and try to get the information that they need so that they can fast track. They think that within next Tuesday or Wednesday, they're going to have all the pre-site visits done. They're going to already know what they need to do from a site visit, but they still, of course, have to get to all the mechanics of exclusive contract, talking with other providers if they have one, and on all those other types of things. And depending upon those types of responses, they can only go fast. They can only go as fast as the slowest response. So once they have that, they can go forward. And they said they feel that if they had to do all 13, it would take them, once they get all the ducks in the row and to try to get all these responses, 90 days. So it's not.
Cindy, I have a question if I could. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, hear you good.
Okay, you're mentioning Access as being the provider or potential provider. I'm a little confused because I look at the 14 providers that got the RFP and Access isn't even listed there.
It's NetWave. Access is, they provided it under Access, but NetWave Broadband is the sub-company underneath Access that actually is the direct provider.
Okay.
It's the brand.
Sorry.
It's their brand.
That clears it up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So it's kind of toe and toe. Access delivered it by them, so we're going to grant it to Access, knowing that NetWave is going to be the direct provider. Hope that makes sense.
Mr. Chair, Cindy, and I think I know the answer, but a couple, just questions about these locations. Talked about deep subsidy and students on free and reduced lunch. I'm just surprised Bonavista
Boom.
isn't here.
You know, they were not provided to us from the CDA. Why, I don't know. I mean, when we look at manufactured parks across the entire county, I mean, there are many more than there's some in the
Right, but they're one of our biggest, you know,
Yes.
after Valley Green. So
Yes.
I guess I'd want some look into that one.
Okay.
And then also the Belle Plaine Trailer Court, because you see Belle Plaine Apartments, but only have 4 students there, where my feeling is there's a lot of students at the Belle Plaine Trailer Court. And again, might not be able to go into this, but I just don't want to lose those two if we find something.
Yeah.
Because when I look at these sites, I just feel that many of them are going to come off because these newer ones, they are under contract. I just know, you know, we know that.
Okay.
Some of these maybe are going to come off.
Yes, and
I-
absolutely, we
I
know
just
that some
hope,
of
I don't want to lose those two. Maybe there's good reason. Maybe they have great access. Maybe somebody else is doing it perfect. But I guess I'd just like a little more information why they didn't make the list.
Well, like, for instance, we know that when we talked with Julie, let me see if I can find my note, that she said that Bluff Heights has internet access to it, and they're currently offering free Wi-Fi. Again, it's not a direct connect like me alone, having my own section. It's just, you walk into like the airport and you get free Wi-Fi, right? So they're offering free guest Wi-Fi to all of their unit dwellers, but we know that can provide some connectivity issues. Too many people on that same line, you get booted, this one gets booted, and you're in the middle of work, and then you lose it. And I know that that's no frustration to any of us. I'm sure as that's getting done. But she said, because we know that we have the free Wi-Fi, we have also taken the additional step and offered a password protected, so they kind of have their individual in there too. That is not sustainable in Bluff Heights. And they said that they reached out to Nuvera to say, can you provide us this type of a solution? And they're still waiting on a response. So, you know, you have those types of things too, where the owner themselves has taken some initiative to try to work with a provider already in their area. So we will continue to ebb and flow. We will add to this that instead of saying these are the exclusive, that we have the manufactured home parks that we really need to consider as a global unit and just ensure that they have adequate access, is what I'm hearing. So we will take that forward, and I will tell you that I will say that knowing this company, that's not going to be an issue for them. As some come, some other ones may pop in.
Right, and I think that's, you know, we're all trying to look for, if I can master this here we go. Looking for biggest bang for the buck as quickly as possible, because I had the same thought, like, wait a minute, I know that place is crawling with kids, Bonavista. And so if I know Valley Green's huge, they got 362, the next one drops down to 66, I guess.
Yep.
And what I also hear you saying is that, you know, I live close to Village Commons, Pike Lake Marsh, you know, fairly new, Louisiana Lofts, you can see the school. Some of those places may already have everything they need, they just need a little coaxing perhaps. So we're not looking to recreate the wheel if they have the wheel already in place, and we're not forcing anybody to do anything. We're just trying to offer a quick option, or an option that happens to be quick, because this would have to be at least signed off by December 1st, not necessarily built.
We want
This
it done
has to
by
be
s-
built.
We do.
This has to be built and access provided.
Okay. By
So
12,
we
or
do
11.
need to move along,
Yeah.
and that's why they've already, this company has already started reaching out.
Yeah.
Just in case we get it, we already have, we
Yeah.
know that this is gonna be difficult, so let's
Right.
try to make whatever moves we can. And what also is nice is, as a network company and a provider, these guys all know each other.
Sure.
So they know who to contact to say, hey, you know, this is out here. I really want you to walk in tandem with NetWave to try to, you know, kind of mirror this with the people that you're providing service to.
Cindy, related to this, Perry is first name basis with all these guys too. Is he involved in this or going to be point on it?
He is, the point person really is going to be Access.
Oh, okay.
Because they're the ones who are taking the initiative to go forward.
He's working on it.
The one thing that Perry did is, you know, he had some conversation with the schools, but it seems like Access actually, Perry's like, I called her, you know, 5 times and they don't call me, where Access goes, we went and sat and knocked on their door, we kind of sat in their office and say, come on, we need an answer. So they do that with the cities and have done that with some of the school districts as well. And they're not afraid to reach directly out with these folks. And so, you know, when you get a middleman involved, sometimes you lose some efficiency as well. We are kept in the loop, and if they need us to help, push and reach out, that's what we'll probably take the directive from this group of folks to try to move along. I actually reached out to Access this morning, and I said, you know, I need to have a conversation with you on the multitude of things that you're doing, such as the towers and the micropops, and when do you need our assistance and when do you not? Again, we're not going to step in if you don't need us. We want you to go and we want you to do. We don't want to be a roadblock to that. But if you need assistance, we want to be there to help support and move things forward. Excuse me.
Yeah, none of this are we looking to be a last mile provider. We're just the on ramp, off ramp. Like, hey, here's our interstate. If you can get on and off to any of these addresses, we're here to help ride the light, so to speak.
Right, and
here's the
broadly
CARES
with
funding
our
for it.
former proposal and this directly.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah, so we're you know, Perry's not out there with a trencher, you know, tearing up 42.
Well,
there
I'm not
was
gonna
a
guarantee
power
that, but-
pole and a trailer and Perry and some so there's been some
Nice. Where is that?
hands-on
Where
stuff.
is he on
There's
here
been some
anywhere?
Yeah, Perry's on.
Oh, hot seat. I love it.
I'm sure we're fine here, but I think it is good for us to publicly exclaim it. Obviously, Access and NetWave have been a great partner, and we're going to continue to partner with them. But in light of a 7-day RFP, emails going to somebody who's not there, I think we want to, I like what you're saying about working with other providers, and we have this amount of funding here, and I hope we keep that in mind where appropriate. If there's a contract in place and another provider can do it with this same CARES funding, I hope we make sure our contract with Access doesn't preclude us working with other people.
Correct, and so you may see if there's some other things that need to come forward to you on, you know, whether the administrator can make some decisions and or it needs to come back to you. Again, we're gonna look to whoever can provide the quickest and the most efficient way, as long as it is adequate service. Don't provide service directly to them that doesn't provide what this family needs, and in a real affordable way.
Great.
So with
Thank
that,
you.
as you look at this, the last thing I want to bring to your attention is we had in there the 494,000. That was the max that we really wanted to put toward this. But knowing that, you look to see what the public-private cost would be is really 328.9. Some pencil sharpening came in, so the cost is lower. We don't know what the schools, if anything, that they can help us provide. We know the city of Jordan has a level of interest. So we're going to continue to tag all these folks and see how many of them want to jump on our bandwagon, and then we'll see where we end up. So again, it's a little squishy, but it's just the contract to, let's say, get going, and let's continue to work on the funding and continue to work on those other developments like you all brought up through those manufactured home parks. So with that, I stand for more questions if you have them.
Yeah, this is, I think it's a great use of our fiber that we already have, and this to me is probably not we need to get this up and running, obviously very quickly for obvious reasons, but I've often wondered out loud, like, why public school does not do more distance learning, not as a mandate, just as an option, as so many colleges do, so this likely will be around for a long, long time, which I think is a good, might not have to build buildings as much, but that's just me.
Mr. Chair, like we do here, we may have a new norm following this. We may say, you know what, there are students who work extremely well going this route, and do we want to have multiple options for them as we move forward? Who knows? We know that as an industry here at Scott County, we're changing how we do things, because if we have more efficiency gains and we've understood a lot more, why beat that dead horse?
Well, what's old is new. Telecommuting and distance learning isn't new. It's been around, and it's just really been dusted off. So, any other questions? So we're being asked to adopt resolution number 2020-112. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chair, I'll move it.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Is there any further discussion? Thank you very much. Appreciate that, all that hard work that everyone put into this to try to get it moving. Tracy, take it away, please.
Commissioner Weckman-Brecky,
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf,
Aye.
Commissioner Beard,
Aye.
Commissioner Beer,
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye.
All right, thank you very much. Now we're gonna move on to item number 7.2, adopt resolution number 2020-117, approving the execution of documents related to a residential mental health treatment facility in the city of Savage and taking other actions in connection therewith. Or Savage, if you prefer.
Good morning again, or is it afternoon yet?
Well, yeah, what time is that? Still,
It's early.
yeah, it is. It is early.
So this is, again, another amendment and authorization for our agreement with the CDA related to the URGE facility. Just a brief history: on November 20th of 2018, the county board entered into a joint powers agreement with the Scott County Community Development Agency to address the operations and financing of the Intensive Residential Treatment Facility, or IRTS, located in Savage, Minnesota. On July of 2019, we amended and restated that JPA based on information and feedback we had received from the state in terms of the structure for that joint powers agreement based on the grants that we were to receive for assisting and funding this facility. And then on January of 2020, we had another set of guidance and clarification from the state for additional changes, including additional documentation they wanted. And then in May of 2020, we received further documentation and clarification of additional things that they had asked us to include, incorporating a couple of additional leasing agreements where the CDA leased to us, we leased to Guild, Guild leased back to the CDA, and it started to get a little confounding. So at that point, we took a pause and we reached out to the state and said, is there a way that we can simplify this? Because at this point, we were going to have about 9 different agreements, all related to the operation and ownership of this facility. And concerns about, does this mean that, because there was a whole other level of review that this had to go through as well, going to the legal counsel's office, where were we going to now have another 9 agreements that all had to be reviewed and changed again. And also there was concern about how is anybody 20, 30 years down the road going to unwind this and figuring out how the breadcrumbs laid, and it started to get very complicated. And so the feedback we got that a more simple approach would be the CDA to quitclaim deed us the land underneath the facility would remove the majority of these agreements. And so what's being approved here today, not the actual quitclaim deed, that's just being understood as a part of this, but we're going to enter into a lease agreement with Guild for the utilization of the facility. So we would be the property managers essentially and lease directly to Guild instead of going through the CDA. We'd also enter into a loan agreement with the CDA for the provisions of financing the completion of the project up to $2.75 million, which we have already done back in late of 2019. And then the county will enter into a project loan agreement with Guild, which this is also something that's been approved before, where this loan agreement allows Guild to repay us beyond the terms of us repaying the CDA for our loan. So the reason for that is that based on the grant requirements, the Guild can only pay for the operation of the facility, so those costs for the day-to-day property maintenance, and then debt service. They can't pay into a capital replacement program, which is one of the goals of this entire thing. So for us to recoup all of those loan costs, we have to enter into a sub-recipient, essentially, loan agreement with them for them to continue paying back that loan until the county has been fully paid back for the full amount, and then we can use our resources to put into a capital replacement program to maintain the facility long-term. Still not, the easiest of arrangements, but much cleaner than the 9 documents I believe we were on before. There's one other change. So previous to this, Great Lakes Management was going to be the actual property management firm contracted with the CDA. Our change is that Guild, which operates several facilities and has their own property maintenance staff, is going to be taking over that property maintenance. And this allows for us to save about $20,000 a year in terms of rent money that can come back to the county that we can utilize to pay off those grant amounts or the loan amounts that we would not have been able to under Great Lakes Management because of the administrative fees and that sort of thing that Guild is just going to kind of eat as part of this agreement. So that really helps us with the seeds for that capital replacement program. So with that, are there any questions?
Well, and just, because the property management, there was a change in a budget or a proposal of a cost, which kind of precipitated that whole
That's correct.
situation. Because, I mean, this goes back months. And this sounds like a lot of mental gymnastics, and I think it was, but it removes a lot of hurdles that were put in place.
Exactly.
So it's not some sort of legal mumbo jumbo to try to shade anything. It's try to make life a lot easier for everybody and cheaper for the taxpayer. Is that a
I believe I
accurate
can
encapsulation?
explain this a lot more easily to the average Scott County resident than I could what we were operating under before.
Yeah, it just seemed like, but we were trying to be in compliance with all the little.
That's correct.
Yeah, which this is still in compliance, just a much easier, cheaper alternative. So we have that before us. Any,
Mr. Chair, I will move to adopt resolution number 2020-117, approving the execution of documents related to a residential mental health treatment facility in the city of Savage.
we have a motion, we have a second. Is there any further discussion on 7.2? Otherwise, Tracy, please.
Commissioner Weckman Brecky.
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf.
Aye.
Commissioner Beard.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate that. We're gonna move on to item number 8, which is committee reports and commissioner updates. I'm gonna look to my right. Commissioner Weckman Brecky, please.
Thank you. July 21st, I think, was the day of our last board meeting. Later that day, I went to the PROACT board meeting. Go to that meeting a couple times a year at their invitation. They were just getting started bringing folks back to their locations as allowed by the executive order. From some of our folks, we heard some concerns about the waivers that they were being asked to sign to bring their children, loved ones, siblings back into the program. Like all kinds of places reopening, insurance companies have suggested waivers. Those waivers, I think my friend over here, county attorney, and I could talk at length about the worth of those waivers, but they tend to be very overbroad and overreaching. So I just was trying to make connections between PROACT and some of those families to work that out. Not really our business, our problem, but I really encouraged PROACT to hear their concerns and hopefully allow participation or allow some kind of adjustments to those waivers. Otherwise, they're just trying to get locations open as they can. Obviously, financially, been a very, very difficult time for organizations like PROACT. We know other organizations who've actually stopped offering services. So that was my plea to PROACT to, do everything they can to stay in this business because we know others are getting out of, especially the day program offerings, even some in this county. And then another thing from the PROACT meeting, they're very interested in the space and what's going on there, and we just need to keep in communication as we understand and know the options for that space. July 28th, we had our budget workshop. Later that day in the evening, I had the Live, Learn, Earn Educational Preparedness Committee meeting. On July 29th, I had a meeting with the new executive director of the CAP agency just to be introduced and talk about some things. We spent a lot of time talking about the CARES funding and some of the ways we work together. Yesterday, I must say, I had my appointment at the Household Hazardous Waste Facility.
Oh, nice.
Dropped off a lot of paint and garage chemicals. My appointment was for 1:30. I arrived at 1:20. They got me in at 1:28. I was driving away at 1:32.
Nice.
So it really does work. I encourage people, since they added more days and times, there still is August availability. So it does work, and they're doing the best job they can under the circumstances there. And actually, I think we have more people using the facility. So I know there's people who are very unhappy about not being able to just get in their car and drive during open hours. But if we're serving more folks, taking more stuff, I mean, it's a good option, and we'll look at someday maybe again having open hours or not. In the meantime, dealt with a lot of calls and emails about the Renaissance Festival. Been talking to some of the townships and township officials about the CARES money. really encouraging those townships who don't see that they're gonna use theirs to earlier rather than later be in contact with us about, giving that money back, you know, so it can be spent here in Scott County. Again, we're not out to just wildly spend tax money,
Right.
but Minnesota and probably Scott County, if we looked at it, usually we pay a lot more in than we get back. So when we get some back, we should try and utilize it here. That's the end of my report.
Thank you very much, appreciate that. Look down to my left, Commissioner Beard.
Mr. Chair, on the 22nd of July, had breakfast with Commissioner, with the administrator over at Wampau's. Just caught up on a few things, always enjoy those good wide-ranging discussions. And then later that morning, not much later, the Mosquito Control Commission, where you'll probably hear about that from Commissioner Wolf as well, and I think we set our preliminary budget at that day, so because we're not going to meet again until September, and we have to have that preliminary levy, maximum possible levy set before that date. On the 28th, participated in the County Board Budget Workshop. On the 29th, the CAP Agency Finance Committee, where Molly, the new CFO, continues to refine the situation there. Boy, dealing with 3 different government calendars, fiscal calendars, on an agency that's required to work January 1st to December 31st is quite a treat. I've never seen balance sheets or P&Ls that look quite like this agency's does, but there's high confidence in the integrity and credibility of the numbers. The question was brought up there about the future of that building. I know, and I'll look at Leslie while I'm speaking about it. Maybe you can speak about it in administrator comments about the future of that building. I know there was a meeting about a week ago with all the tenants there talking about the disposition of the workforce center. Of course, the CAP agency is vitally involved in the future of that building, so perhaps the administrator can speak to that in her remarks. That's my report.
All right, thank you very much. Let's go to Commissioner Ulrich. I always forget, I want to go back and forth.
Okay, on the 23rd, I had my regular ongoing meeting with the Savage Mayor and Administrator and the County Administrator. The 24th, Greater MSP Board meeting. There's a few things that were key there. They're thinking about developing a regional small business strategy that's time to help the small businesses. They're a big job creator, and so they're going to be looking at how to develop a small business strategy. They've been talking about racial equity and police brutality, obviously, as a result of the incident in Minneapolis, and with a lot of discussion there and initiatives and so forth. And I raised the point a meeting or two ago that, you know, you're having all this discussion and all these potential initiatives, and yet you're not really involving the region. Minneapolis is actually kind of a small part of the region. I mean, if you said Minneapolis is 400,000, and the region itself is over 3 million, I think. You really want to involve the whole region in these kind of discussions on racial equity and so forth. And I said the discussions might be a little, and I'm sure a little different, or maybe more than a little different, out in other parts of the region than they might be in Minneapolis. I said, for example, in Minneapolis they're talking about how to disband the police department, and out here in the region, we're probably talking about how to encourage and come along and support the police department, because we kind of feel they're under attack. I mean, yes, there was bad apples in the Minneapolis Police Department, did a horrific act, and there's some obviously racial inequity and racism going on, but we don't need to throw out the police department and put the police department under attack. So I said we really want to broaden, I think, the discussion to the whole region on these issues of equity and brutality and protecting businesses. They didn't protect businesses in Minneapolis, and to less extent St. Paul. So I mean, we really have to figure out what's going to make this region safe and equitable and together. So I was pushing for a more regional discussion, and they agreed with that. And the other thing, one thing that's, I think it's August 12th that the Met Council is supposed to, sorry, the Met Council is supposed to adopt the EDA plan that can, to give us approval to seek federal EDA funds. That's August 12th, I believe. So that should be coming to play. I don't know what that noise is. That's not from me.
He's at mowing lawn.
July 27th was a Greater MSP Investment Board Committee meeting, and they're talking about how to rebuild the regional brand and how to eliminate deal breakers. You know, there's a whole constellation of different deal breakers that have different parts of the region respond really well to a lead and to a business interested in expanding. Others not so much, and there's many deal breakers that they're going to identify and present, and probably go on a roadshow and talk about putting our best foot forward to people that want to develop and expand business or come to this region to build a business, and how we can not have deal breakers. July 28th, chair, vice chair, and then a budget workshop. 29th, MPETA board meeting. It was kind of interesting in regard to COVID. They're installing ultraviolet germicidal irradiation emitters in their filters at the Burnsville Bus Garage, Burnsville Transit Station, and the Egan Bus Garage for greater safety. And anyhow, so that was pretty cool. The other thing that happened at MBTA, they are going to make a switch. They put an RFP for legal services. For many years, it had been Kennedy and Graven had been the legal representation. Jim Strawman is retiring, and they just received proposals from other firms and decided to go with Wiley Law, the Wiley Law firm.
Wiley Law.
August 3rd. August 3rd. What's that? Did you like that name?
Yeah, they're working with a Wiley Law firm. I like that.
Dewey Cheatham and Howell.
Better than Dewey Cheatham and Howell, but anyhow. August 3rd, the Smart League Mobility Management Board, and as you might guess, the dial ride trips have gone way down. May of 2019, we had 7,874 trips. May this year, 1,140. April 2019, 7,500 some, and under 1,000 in May. So April was lower, and May has got a couple hundred more trips, so there's a slight upward trend. Volunteer drivers, as you might imagine, have been non-existent. They have not been functioning in April, May, and June. There's about 25 potential volunteer drivers. A few of them are willing to drive in this environment. I express concern about that because these drivers are certainly in the most vulnerable category in terms of age. And so, but they're going to be thinking about that, talking about that, I think, next week. And I think it's an area to be cautious in. That's the end of my report.
Thank you very much,
Can
Commissioner
I ask,
Wolf.
Mr. Chair, while John's on, John, you can still hear.
Yes?
Yeah, so that greater MSP, the rebranding, you know, it's funny, I turned on the TV on Sunday and there was the 3M golfing thing, you know, going on up here in Minneapolis, and I didn't even know that was going on, and, you know, and as I watched it, they didn't say much about Minneapolis at all, you know, even at the end, and so, boy, it's funny.
Not necessarily rebranding, it's rebuilding the brand,
rebuilding,
because the brand has taken a tremendous hit in the region, in the country, in the world. You know, all these things that happened in Minneapolis don't present well to the rest of the.
And that's what I'm saying, it's so crazy how, you know, everything was going, we had the Final Four, we had a Super Bowl, there was a bunch of good things that happened here, and boy, downward it went pretty quick, and boy, building it back up is gonna be a tough road, so anyhow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. And my report, well, thank you, Mr. Chair. On the 22nd, the mosquito control, and we did, you know, just a preliminary budget of 0 levy for next year. As Commissioner Beard alluded to, the Vermilion River Joint Powers, we also did the budget. We're gonna keep that at 0 also. Elko New Market, met, the city met, and there was not too much going on there, very quick meeting. On the 27th, met with the administrator, went over a couple of items, and then the Watershed Management Organization. One topic was the McMahon Lake, the outlet there, and what's going to happen. Spring Lake Township, just a couple, that motorcycle deal is not as bad, but still out there. The 28th, the board workshop. On the 3rd, Prior Lake City Council had a workshop and their city council meeting. As I reported, I think, was it a couple weeks ago, they were talking about that high-end storage type of system there, and they denied it last night. There's not a great use for that 10 acres there, and so, in fact, it went down 4-0. Drew a lot of people in there. There was quite a few, so don't know what's going to happen with that yet, but we'll see. And Credit River had their monthly meeting. They, as I mentioned earlier, allocated $300,000 to broadband, and they'll just let the county decide what to go do on that. And then Cedar Lake Township had their monthly meeting, and really the biggest issue that came up was there. And I reported this last, I think, November, December. There was a guy that wants to fly his helicopter to and from work, and to and from his cabin, and well, he's acquiring more land, from what I hear, and he is intent on having his own helicopter pad out there and getting it going. As a matter of fact, there was an article, and I didn't see it, it was in the Star Tribune, on B3 or 5 about this same guy who has a helicopter place up in his cabin up north where he's flying it in. I don't even know his name, I can look it up here, but anyhow, so he wants to fly the helicopter to his cabin and to, you know, his place at home, and I just think, what if everybody did that? You know, it's I don't know. I think we'd have a little bit of chaos in the sky there. So that's something we're going to have to take a look at. And then the 4-H people, a number of them called me up or emailed, and they'd like to get open up that scale shooting facility and get some kids out doing get them out doing something different and getting back to normal. So, Mr. Chair, that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I would just say thank you to you two, because you guys must have cut down the mosquitoes. Because 3 weeks ago, they were carrying me away in the middle of asphalt, and last night I was on my deck, which never happens this time of year, so, and 0%, love that. And by the way, my helicopter's on order, but they're pending some credit checks, something silly, but we'll see how that goes. On the 21st, I have a building workshop written down here. Am I the only one? Was that in my calendar? Did we not have a workshop or something on the 21st, or am I dreaming? We had a board meeting. Yeah, okay, good, nice, all right, good.
Yeah.
Boom, look at that, we made it all the way through there.
Yeah, we all were there.
Yeah. Well, just wanted to make sure I wasn't going crazy, I kind of rely on you for that.
Oh, no, you're going.
Yeah, I know. But it's a fun crazy, you should join, it's really awesome. Anyway, moving on the 28th, Chair, Vice Chair, also that day we had our budget workshop, which was a great discussion. I thought it was awesome. Very open, transparent, candid discussion. 29th, Leslie and I had a Zoom/phone call with Fairview. They kind of making the rounds with saying, hey, same thing we're doing with their townships. If there's money left over, you know, we serve, I don't remember what the number was, 32% of your county. Had a good discussion, and Leslie laid out kind of what we're looking for, or looking at, and which is well thought out, and they saw that as well, so we'll see what happens. And like many of you have had numerous calls and emails on shooting sports, extension, Master Gardener, but also on the, seems like a month ago, but the Ren Fest. And I believe we copied everyone on a letter that went out under my name, just to Mr. Peterson, based on he coming before the board with the vendors. And I personally have not had as many emails, phone calls on any one topic as I have on that, which were in stark contrast to what was presented to the board. So I thought it important. I think many of us did, just out of fairness, to say, hey, this is what we heard. Now this is what we're hearing. And on the 41-169 involvement with that as well. So that went out, I believe. Looking at Leslie, I think that did go out. So I just thought important that you guys made sure you were aware of that. That completes my report. So I'm going to look over to my right with the karaoke setup over there, our county administrator.
karaoke.
Take it away. What's your tune? We'll get it set up for you.
So just a quick update on the Workforce Center that Commissioner Beard asked for. We did have a member go back to a work session with the board. Our preference was to try to work with our partners on CAP and the school agency and PROACT on what their interests were. The school district, my understanding is, did make an offer for the building on Dean's Lake, but somebody else had made an offer, so they were waiting to see how this played out. Plan B was to purchase the Workforce Center from the county and maybe eventually the CAP. They also have an interest in continuing to partner with PROACT. They see a joint mission between what the school district does and PROACT does. So right now, we are waiting until actually sometime this week. Probably Brad felt that he would be in contact with Darren, trying to find out what happened there. But we were following through on that direction. Until that point, we were continuing to work on that common agreement for how we fund cleaning and management and the maintenance that needs to go on, as the county will have staff there through sometime in early 2022. And so it's trying to work through those issues, and Jeannie and Brad Davis are both working on that. So I don't know, Commissioner, does that provide enough of an update for you?
Thank you.
Okay. The other thing is Commissioner Brecky mentioned the household hazardous waste. I know in my scene column I'm talking about by appointments and a change, and right now it's temporary and we'll have to evaluate, but that when people do leave, they are appreciative of it. And I believe it's August 18th in communication with Brad here that they will be opening up Tuesdays, so there are additional appointments out there.
Yeah.
And we already were operating an additional 5 or 6 hours a week, more than we were pre-COVID. So there is no wait. You're getting in, you're getting out. Certainly go on our website and take a look to make an appointment. And those were a couple things I had to update you on.
Well, I will just jump on that and say, the beer household has a slot scheduled in September, because that worked for our schedule. I gotta wait till September to get rid of those TVs. You need a couple tube TVs? Drop them off in his driveway. And so, yeah, I don't always like to schedule something simple like that, but I also don't want to wait 2 hours in line. So I'm looking forward to my 4, 5, 6 minute
2 minutes.
wait. Because
in
you
and out.
factoring your early arrival and your
Right.
4, 5, 6 minutes. That's
Right.
So September we will be there with bells on. So yeah, thanks. And it is interesting that we're open more now than we were pre. It just maybe doesn't feel like it. And it is what
Yeah,
it
and I
is.
mean, there is a backlog, right? Because we were closed down. So
yeah.
it's trying to get through that
Yeah.
backlog.
Yeah.
And then I would anticipate these appointments evening out a little more as well. So, but I know Kate has talked about the backlog of people wanting to get in, and also in communication with other counties. People are waiting several hours.
No, thanks.
And so trying to find that balance, I'm not so sure that appointments aren't a more efficient and effective use of everybody's time overall.
And I don't want to open a can of worms here, but can you imagine the first person into that reuse room after all of this? It's going to be like shopping at Lowe's.
Yeah, hopefully we can open that up, because I bet it's getting full, like one person at a time with a mask or something. Is there any thoughts on that?
You're going to see Kate in a workshop coming up. You might be able to ask her that.
Great, thank you.
All kinds of good stuff to be reused. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Looking down on my right, Mr. County Attorney. What do you have for us today? Good news? Good news?
Well, I also went to the hazardous waste facility, and much like Commissioner Barb Beckman, I was in and out in 2 minutes.
Nice.
So it was fantastic, but we do not have to meet.
Awesome. Thank you for that. All right. Well, we are looking down to item number 11, adjournment. But before we do, I'd just like to mention that we are meeting after this county board in a workshop setting to receive information on subsurface sewage treatment systems. So come one, come all. It's going to be exciting. And following that workshop, we will meet in another workshop, the county board, to participate in a diversity strategy work session with, I got to get this right, is it Mr. Bucata Hayes? That name is awesome. First question I'm going to ask, is that a stage name or is that real? I love it. Just flows.
That is his name.
Mr. Bucata Hayes, like maybe he's got to act he's taking on the road. But so with that, I will entertain a
Motion to adjourn.
We've got a motion.
Second.
We got a second. Any discussion? Otherwise, Tracy is ready to go.
Commissioner Weckman-Brecky,
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf,
Aye.
Commissioner Beard,
Aye.
Commissioner Beer,
All right,
Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye.
there we are. So I will gavel out